celebrating Jews of Latin ancestry, the Dallas Jewish Historical Society is sponsoring an event called Viva Shalom on April 30th at 6 p.m. at Shira Israel Synagogue. More information you can find on their website. That's also on the back of your program. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, and I'm going to do a little shift here to his PowerPoint. Let me give you a little background about Dr. Rey Romero. Obtained his undergraduate degrees in French, Spanish, and linguistics from Rice University. He earned a PhD in Spanish linguistics from Georgetown University, and he received a certificate in medical interpreting from the Southern California School of Interpretation. He previously taught Spanish and linguistics at Georgetown University, the University of Texas Pan American, Texas A&M University, and Texas A&M University. He is assistant professor of Spanish linguistics at the University of Houston downtown, where he also directs the translation minor. Dr. Romero has conducted field work in Turkey, New York City, and Houston, and his book, Spanish and the Bosphorus, is based on his research in Turkey. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Romero, who will be speaking this afternoon on the role of Ladino in sustaining Sephardic communities.
Buenas tardes. So I'll be talking about the role of Ladino assisting Sephardic communities. But something that is very important about Sephardic is that I would... louder?
That's better.
We're going to talk about Sephardic identity. So when we talk about this PowerPoint, think about identity and what makes your identity, what components it has, because we're going to see how that is relevant for language, specifically for Ladino. So identity is composed of many different things. It could be, we call it the aspects of selfhood. It could be intrinsic, how do you see yourself? How do you perceive yourself? It could be extrinsic, how do others see you? It could be static, some things never change, some things never change throughout life, or it could be dynamic. Sometimes it depends who you are, it depends on the context, or who you're with, the situation. Sometimes you inherit part of your identity, like your nationality, your ethnicity. These are things you're born with. And then later, sometimes you can acquire more components of identity, like your education and your job. So all of these are parts of identity, and we're going to see where language could potentially fit. This is just a little map that kind of puts all those components in the same place, but basically it's a way to understand that identity has a lot of components, and it depends on where you put the emphasis of what you perceive yourself or what others perceive yourself to be. So where does language fit into this? Well, it could be intrinsic identity. It's language part of how we see ourselves. In other words, is it important the language can speak how we see ourselves? Am I going to stop being Hispanic if I don't speak Spanish? Am I going to stop being Sephardic if I don't speak real Spanish or Latino? Extrinsic, how the others see us. Static is like something permanent. Once I've acquired this language, it's going to stick with me forever, or am I going to lose it? That's dynamic. It's something, language is something we can change. Something we can acquire later in life. You can acquire a new language, a new identity. Or something we're born with. Of course, our native language is something we're born with. Something that we inherit from our families, from our parents. Or is it something that we can acquire later? So when we looked about the history of Sephardic communities, and also how Latino plays a role, look at all these different parts, because many times it can be something, language can be something that they lose, something that they maintain, something that is not necessary for Sephardic identity, or something that is very important for Sephardic identity. What language is this? What do you guys think? Rochelle, you know what this is. When I usually show this picture, people say it's Hebrew. But really what it is, it's Spanish, or Judeo-Spanish, written in Hebrew script. And so nowadays, Spanish is not written with the Hebrew script, it's written with Latin script, which we call Aquilla Shalai, which is the one you're going to see in most publications nowadays. But for most of the lifetime of Judeo-Spanish, it was written with Hebrew script. And so a lot of the journals, a lot of the books that you're going to see from maybe 100 years ago is going to be in this language, in this alphabet. So I'll talk a little bit about the Sephardic experience. So Sephardic means they're Jews in Spain, or Spanish Jews. They live in Spain. They're a multilingual and urban society. They were primarily urban society. They call it the period of convivencia because at that time Sephardic Jews lived together with Muslims and Christians in the same cities, and they interacted and depended on one another. They were a merchant and urban class. Most of the time they were autonomous, which means they were given authority over their own educational and religious institutions. But unfortunately, there were a lot of tensions. Starting in 1391, there were a series of pogroms and massacres. And all of this culminated in 1492 when the Catholic monarchs finally conquered the entire peninsula, and then they want to unify the peninsula under one religion. And so they gave them, not really the choice, but more like they forced them to either be convert or you are out of Spain. And so most of them decided to leave Spain. And where did they go? Well, they went to a lot of different places, but one of the places where they went was the Ottoman Empire. And in that case, you're no longer talking about Jews in Spain, but you're talking about Spanish Jews in Ottoman lands. And now you're going to have more layers to the identity, of course. So now that they are in the Ottoman Empire, they again fit now the system of Islam, in which they call it the Zini or the Ahl Zini system, in which again they have their own autonomy, they can run their own educational and religious institutions, and they're going to be different from other Jewish communities that were already there before. They're different in many different ways. For instance, they had more technology, they had better education. They came with, for instance, a printing press. They came with literature, with books, and so again, they became an urban society. And there was a certain prestige to this community because, like I said, they were very experienced in trade and that technology at the time. And also they became the leaders of science and entertainment. There's always the doctors to the Sultan, they're usually Jewish. And so there were also the Jewish women that used to help connect the palace with the outside community. They were called Kiras. They were also Sephardic Jewish women. So they became very, very important, and yes, they became part of the society, Ottoman society, very quickly. So we can say that at this point, Spanish was part of the Jewish community in all domains. Spanish was the language of the home, Spanish was the language of culture and religion, Spanish was the language of education and work. Sephardic Jews had their own institutions. They used to call them verdades. Verdad means to read, so they had their own schools, they did everything in Spanish. And also, because they were autonomous for government purposes, they also used Spanish. So this is kind of like the ideal situation where the language takes every single sphere of usage. You can use language as a full member of that community. So once again, Spanish is the language of religion, which means static. Back in those days, like you're Jewish, so you're Jewish the rest of your life. It was also the language of trade, which was interactional. And in fact, there are stories of people that were not Sephardic, in order to be part of the trade and part of the Mediterranean commerce, they had to learn Spanish in order to survive as merchants. At this point, you have a very deep connection between being Jewish and speaking Spanish. In other words, if you were Jewish in the Ottoman Empire, you more than likely spoke Spanish. And if you spoke Spanish in the Ottoman Empire, more than likely you were Jewish. And you can tell this in the names of the language. At this point, we call it Judeo or Judeo, which means Jewish, or Judesmo, which means Judaism, or Español de nosotros, our Spanish. So you can see that how Spanish became a very intrinsic part of Jewish and Sephardic identity. So then things began to change again as Turkey moves from an empire to a republic. We have several reforms. I'm not going to go through all that, but a lot of changes. The Ottoman tried to fix things here and there in order to be modernized, including promoting equal rights and citizenship. This was really good, but in a way it also made everybody Turkish citizenships. And they really promote a nationalistic view from the Turkish Republic by imposing Turkish as the official language, which means that now all the groups, all the minority groups that were there before, now had to learn the official language in order to be part of no longer Ottoman, but now Turkish society. A lot of things happened, including population exchanges with Greece, foreign language education was banned, unfair taxation. All of these things that happened so quickly within 20 years really made the Jews in Turkey to migrate to other places, including Western Europe and to the land of Israel back in 1949. Eventually there were riots in Istanbul, which just increased more mass migration to the point that now we really cannot tackle a very sizable Jewish community in Istanbul or in Turkey. A lot of them, they live in the diaspora, which will be like a second diaspora. And now we can also look at an example from New York City. New York City had a rather different story with similar consequences. So we have very early on, during the time of when New York used to be called New Amsterdam, was a Dutch colony. Sephardic Jews arrived from Brazil. But then later, in the 1800s, 1880s, that's when you have the first wave of Spanish-speaking Sephardic to New York City, coming from the Ottoman Empire, and also from the Middle East and Europe. They established around the Lower East Side, but then eventually they moved elsewhere. In 1906, English became mandatory for naturalization. So again, this impacted the language quite a bit. Everybody now had to learn English. And you can tell this in the newspapers. I'll show you a picture of a newspaper that was promoting English classes at this point. In the 1920s, you have the second wave after the First World War. And then you have a boom of Judeo-Spanish newspapers, after 19 newspapers in the 1940s. So you have all this Spanish being spoken. And there are many, many, many stories, I don't have time to go over that, about how they interacted with other Spanish-speaking groups, such as the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans, how basically they spoke the same language, and that really helped keep the language alive. Finally, in the 1950s, we had the third wave of Sephardic immigration from Eastern Europe and Turkey, and this is the post-Second World War II generation that came because a lot of those states, a lot of those countries in Eastern Europe wants to be able to start to promote nationalistic policies. This is the newspaper I was going to show you. It says La America. It was a very important newspaper in New York City. Once again, in Judeo-Spanish, but everything in Hebrew script. So again, it's a period of fluctuation. In the 1990s, you see a lot of Mizrahi and Orthodox Jews that move into Sephardic immigrations, and the Sephardic tend to move towards the periphery. And that's kind of sort of where we are right now. If you are trying to find a Sephardic community in New York City, you find it outside in the periphery, maybe in the Bronx, or maybe in New Jersey even. Some of the people that I interview actually interview them in New Jersey, even though they had been in New York for the longest time. And now, I guess we can call it the modern period, the contemporary period, since 1992, after the 500 years anniversary of the Reconquista and the expulsion from Spain. You have a revitalization period. We have courses in universities. all over the world, in France, in the United States, we have classes here too. We have Latino festivals, such as the one we have today. We have Safari Film festivals, so we have a new way to try to promote and maintain the language and the culture. So that was one of the examples I was going to show you from the newspaper, La America. It really tried to teach everybody English. And something interesting is that you have Espanol right here, you have Inglés, and then you have Yiddish. So you have Buenos dias, Señor, good day, sir. And then Guten Tag, mein Herr. Yiddish is not so good. But you can see how they really try to promote English early on in the community, which is why almost any immigrant group now really shifts towards English after the second or third generation. So Ladino or Judeo-Spanish now is considered an endangered language. And what happens to the language of any connection when the language becomes endangered? How is the concept of identity relevant for language maintenance? How can the language being part of their identity, how can that help preserve the language and preserve the identity? And what can we learn from the Spanish and the Sephardic experience? This is a picture I took during my field work in Turkey, in the Prince Islands, from Puyukadat. Yes. There are no cars allowed there, so I think it's by horses. That was one of the main communities in Istanbul, outside of Istanbul. Yes, only in the summer, a lot of people have their summer homes there, so to escape the heat from the city, they go to the islands and they have their houses there. And that's very interesting because that's one of the places where the community kind of gets together and kind of reconnects again. So we can talk about how a language becomes endangered. And ideally, in a bilingual community, if you speak two languages, you're going to use one language for one thing and another language for another situation. So we could say that Spanish for the longest time was the language of the home, for religion and entertainment. And that Turkish or English was reserved for school or for work or for government. And this is kind of how it was for generations. We use Spanish for this, but we're going to use Turkish and English for that, or English for that. And so it's very easy to compartmentalize these languages. It's called allocation, but let's see what happens. During time, you may no longer use Spanish at home. It may just become, now you use English at home. And this happens very, very quickly. Like I told you, within 2 or 3 generations, we can have the grandparents who speak Spanish, you have the parents who speak Spanish and English, and then you have the kids who only speak English. And many times it happens that the grandkids cannot communicate with the grandparents. And it can happen in a matter of 2 generations or 3 generations. So if Spanish stops being the language of the home, now only English is used in the home. You can also change religion. Let's say that before you would use Spanish or Hebrew for religion purposes, and now because of the community, the way the community changes, now you use English for the same. And so very easily you can lose the domain to the point that it only stays in very few areas where you can actually hear Spanish. I think today we have a presentation from the students, the stories of Shira, which are usually told in Judeo-Spanish and are supposed to be funny and for entertainment. What happens if you lose that, then you no longer have any space to hear Spanish. And that can happen very quickly. So my research in Istanbul, I did it between 2007 and 2009. And then in New York City, 2013, And basically I interviewed the community in order to assess the language and then also to see where they use the language, what they thought of the language. I'm a linguist by profession, so a lot of it included a translation exercise where they had to give me a sentence in Spanish. I would tell them the sentence in Turkish, they would tell me the sentence in Spanish. As a way to try to pinpoint where exactly the language was changing. And then I published my results in 2012 in my book. So what I found out in Istanbul is that in Istanbul you had a classic shift towards Turkish. So you have the older members of the community, who use Judeo-Spanish most of the time for most contexts. Every now and then they will use Turkish for entertainment or with friends or at the home, but most of the time, most of them, they use Judeo-Spanish. As you go up, or as you go younger, the amount of Turkish increases more and more. Even English appears and even Hebrew appears. And so that's very classical. The younger generation uses the language less and they use the majority language the most. So you have, for instance, this young lady who uses Turkish. She's a member of the community, a Sephardic community, but she uses Turkish for everything and even English because she's at her work, she needs to use English. And compare that with maybe this particular woman, 70-year-old woman. She uses Judeo-Spanish in every single context. And so, but again, the shift is towards everybody moving towards Turkish.
So those numbers on the left are the ages.
Right, so F and M is female or male, and then the numbers are the age. Right. It will be the age in order to, for anonymity. Right. And this is my results from New York City. And this time you can see there's a lot more English. A lot more red, a lot more English. And so basically English predominates in the community, and Judeo-Spanish is only used for the language of the older generation. To tackle the older generation, which is the same domain where it was used the most in Istanbul. So it seems that Judeo-Spanish, that's where it is surviving, is in order to communicate with the grandparents or with elderly family members. And so you have, for instance, you don't really have that pattern that you see in Istanbul. You have this older lady, 80-year-old woman. She just uses English everywhere. And then you have this 52-year-old man that she sometimes uses Judeo-Spanish at home and with the older generation. But it's interesting that some of them in the professional field, because of the Hispanic community in New York City, immigrants from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, other areas, they found it very handy to keep the Judeo-Spanish to talk about other Spanish speakers. And it's very easy to understand one another because their dialects are the same language. So all you gotta do is, fine-tune your ear and change things here and there. It's the way American English speakers will understand Australians or British people. You just have to do a few changes here and there. But that's kind of nice how they decided how Judeo-Spanish came in handy. Even if every now and then they had to change the way they pronounce things. So this is important because when the language is only used with very few domains, which is called peripheral language domains, people may think that it doesn't have economic value, which gives it a low prestige, which increases unbalanced bilingualism. By that I mean that it's just going to accelerate the more English or the more Turkish that will be present. It will be used less, and it will be furthermore put in a peripheral language domains non-stop. So this is like a vicious cycle that needs to be stopped and needs to be maintained, because otherwise this is a very quick way to lose language. So the current domains. I'm going to play some recordings, but you can find the English translated there. How many guys know Spanish? Raise your hand. Okay. Whether you speak Judeo-Spanish or the other Spanish, see if you can, yeah, de los otros lo muestro, yeah. See if you can hear the differences. So, unfortunately, Spanish is being replaced with Turkish in most domains. Spanish is no longer the language of religion, and you're going to hear this young man who is complaining about it.
It was about vive, acá es in Turkey, acá es in Spanish, in Hebrew. Now they read it in Turkish, but I remember that my grandmother's house, we read in Hebrew, but the stories in Spanish. It was bastardo de if you read it, God gave us what she said that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he mispronounced it. It's not,
Yes.
in realidad we say most abastaba.
Yes, so
Mas abastaba.
one thing I'm going to point out is that the younger speakers, they're not going to be speaking proficiently in Judeo-Spanish. And you're going to see a lady from New York in a couple of slides that, you know, there's no gender agreement, there's no masculine and feminine agreement, there's no singular and plural. That's one of the characteristics that I was studying. That sometimes they mispronounce things, or it's part of language change because of how little it's being used. So they get very little time to use it and to receive feedback. Also, if you speak French, you're going to notice a lot of French words here and there. For instance, in the next clip.
Porque en el CAL están empezados en hebreo. Todas las jeunesse ahora, el nuevo, las jeunesse, hablan todo, ellos están empezando a que se empiecen en la lengua hebreo. Los cantes, las verajas, todos están empezando. El nuevo Nisim.
So she makes a little bit of Hebrew and Turkish and French. That's okay. But they're both complaining about that. You know, the older speaker and the younger speaker, they're both complaining that, hey, like we're not hearing Spanish as much as we used to in the synagogue. You know, and now we're using the stories, the prayers, the berahas, some of the traditional singing. It's now done in Turkish instead of Spanish. So another thing that you can reveal your identity using languages with the kind of name that you have. So whereas before you would have traditional Sephardic names like Moshe or Moise, now they're changing them to be more Turkish or more neutral as far as, so you cannot tell the Sephardicness of the name.
La jeunesse de ahora está un poco hablando la más parte en turco. Y los nombres, bien, hay muchos que se trocaron. Hay que se llamaba Abraham, se llama Ibrahim.
Yeah, that's me in the background. I had to continue the conversation. But yeah, that's one of the ways that you're going to reveal your identity using language, simply by changing your name. And again, you know, the older generation is complaining nowadays, everybody is speaking Turkish names. Now let's go from New York City. Let's see what I have to say about using the language at home. So she's saying that at home they always spoke Jewish, which she calls it, but so they would never call it Jewish, they call it Spanish. And in Izmir, my grandmother only knew Judeo-Spanish and a little bit of Greek. My mom says that my grandmother spoke Greek very well, but I don't speak Greek. So in Izmir, I was forced to speak Judeo-Spanish all the time. Otherwise, I would not be able to communicate with my grandmother. So
I want to say that, for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in Turkey, 81 years old, so that my home language, not only my home language, but my neighborhood language was Ladino, or as we call it, Espanol. We call it Espanol. We need another name now, only because it's a different kind of Spanish. So Ladino is the most popular they use. But at the time, we just called it Espanol, like you mentioned. And that was indeed, speaking Spanish was indeed, as Rey said, the hallmark of being Jewish. Only Jews spoke Spanish, and Rey also alluded to the fact that in some places, non-Jews had to learn the language, and specifically it was the city of Salonika, or Thessaloniki in Greece, where the majority of the residents were Jewish, and the port had to close down on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, because the Jews just wouldn't work. And so the commerce and everything was depended on the Jewish element. And so non-Jews who had to deal with them had to learn the Spanish language. So that was a very interesting situation. And the main thing that I really would like people to know is that the biggest death blow to our language was the Holocaust. People seem to think that the Holocaust affected only Ashkenazic Jews. It's not so. A large portion of the Ladino-speaking populations of Europe, especially what is now Greece, which of course was part of the Ottoman Empire, was massacred and disappeared. And with it went our language. So of course the nationalistic element factors maybe would have weakened the language, but it was really the Holocaust that did the biggest blow.
yeah, and that's why my research focused on New York City and Istanbul, which are communities that did not suffer the Holocaust. Because otherwise, if I were to focus on the communities, it would be very, very, very difficult to find speakers or even a community. I know of places where there are only like five speakers have left, like in Serbia or the ex-Yugoslavia.
Our last question?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I'll say a little short. So I'm Linda Abelson Evans. I teach here at SMU, but also belong to a very tiny but diverse Reformed Jewish congregation, Beth El. And years ago, we had Rachel and our Spanish-speaking Sephardic members doing a service in Ladino, and I would love to do that again and collaborate with the Sephardic community within Dallas and SMU colleagues and anyone who would like to come. So that will be for the future, and we'd love to have them come back. But the second point is our task force of the Dallas Office of Welcoming Communities and Immigrant Affairs has just launched a database that we've been working on for 2 years that catalogs resources and services for refugee, immigrant, international residents and visitors, anything that they might like to find. It's now active, but we're still building it. So it would be great to add Sephardic and Ladino, cultural and language resources to that for people to be able to find. So we just love to talk with you later about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me at SMU. Appreciate it.